Hey, and howdy to all you fine folks out there in podcast land. Welcome back to this week's installment of the JR the Handler Show with me, your host, JR the Handler. Today, I have such a great guest on. I'm not even going to do any pre-roll banter before I invite them on. I've already got them dialed up on the Zoom machine. It's recording. Everything's working so far. So we're just going to jump right into this. But before I do that, I want to say thanks to everybody who's been following the show so far and commenting and liking and sharing the show and giving feedback and voicemails and texts and all that fun stuff. It's been amazing, and I appreciate you, and I implore you to keep doing it. Share it with a friend. That's the best thing you can do for the show is if you hear something you like, go over there, share the show, send it to a buddy, family member who you think would enjoy it, and let's spread the love that way. Without any further ado, my guest today is probably one of my longest friends from Nashville. I met this guy so early into my career and fairly early into his career that it's so long ago we almost forgot about it. But we'll get into all that and how we got reconnected years later. But today's guest is my friend. I could say so much. He's also friends with most of the guests we've had on so far. I wanted to have him on a few weeks ago after the Jeff Gossett interview because he's one of Jeff's best friends. So hopefully we'll get some dirt on Brother Jeff today too. But without any further ado, my brother, current tour manager for the world-renowned Big and Rich, my boys, my brother, Mr. Chris Tate. How are you, Tater?
Howdy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm great, buddy. You asked if I was playing your voicemail when you jumped on earlier. I was not, but I was playing.
424 the Handler.
Yes, sir. 424 Handler.
Got it as saved in my favorites.
I love it. But no, that was the song that played after the song you sent me last night. And I don't know. I'm sure a lot of you folks out there listening and watching do this as well. If you hear a song and it just hits you just right, and you know there's somebody else that would appreciate that, you send it, you screenshot it, send it, somehow you get it on over to them, no matter what time, day or night, just to let them know this is where you're feeling. And we do that all the time with our buddies on the road, guys and gals. We do that all the time. So last night, I don't know, 10 o'clock, Tater sends me just a screenshot of him, of his phone, and it's Hank Williams Jr., Outlaws Reward. And if you don't know that song, go listen to the Hank Jr. Outlaws Reward. It's on that 5-0 record. Man, it just a banger. And you sent me that, and I knew what kind of mood you were getting in for the show today, so I was pumped up. But thank you for coming on, buddy.
I see the shirt. Man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, that inspired the shirt. If anybody out there is watching this on YouTube, I've got my this was a tour they did. I want to say it was for Fruit of the Loom. Yeah, it is. I got the Fruit of the Loom tag on here. They did a tour. I guess they sponsored a tour one year, and it's Charlie Daniels, Hank Jr., Travis Tritt, and Joe D. Messina.
Yeah. We're both country music, encyclopedias, so to speak. You might be a level above me.
I don't know. We all got our certain volumes in there. We're better.
And old Eddie Stubbs is at the top of that list. But I think Hank might have been one of the first touring acts to sell merch. I think he might have been in the beginning phases of that. Now, it was probably way back, before the beard and stuff. But if I remember right, in that world, that he was one of the first artists to start selling his merch out on the road. But
that wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me.
And that probably was Merle Kilgore.
Or even prior to that, his mom and the people that before, probably. Let's see, he started in the 50s and the 60s, and then by the time he was, that was the late 50s. Well, but they started him so early.
Yeah.
But I bet, I could imagine they were selling Hank Williams stuff at his shows, still trying to get on that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you got to think too. You mentioned that early on with the merch. people don't realize that touring as we know today, I was telling some people the other day, what we know as touring today was like the early 70s before there were ever trucks and you traveled with equipment and people. Before that, it was just you showed up, you played with what they had, used a local band sometime. I mean, it was the Wild Wild West. And the first equipment they ever used was all Broadway stuff from New York because they were the only ones with the trucks. And back then, if you needed a PA, you needed speakers, you had to have a cabinet shop. There was nowhere to order this stuff. You had to make it. So you think about it just being there since forever, but these things had to start at some point. So that's a good, I don't know. I'd like somebody out there I say this all the time. I don't do any research. Any story you hear on here is just something I heard. I don't do any looking up to fact check or anything. That's just the way I heard it. I like it that way. Yeah. So if anybody out there wants to check down on that would be a fun fact to know. Who was the first? Was Hank Jr.? Did Tater just drop a little nugget of info on us there?
I mean, again, I haven't researched it on the World Wide Web. That's just something I've heard from some old timers that he was the first one to actually have full on merch at shows. But anyway,
wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, and that's where we get most of our info. I mean, we just hear stuff. Right. You hear stuff. Right.
That song I sent you last night, real quick, and then we can get on with whatever. But I happened to be, looking on Facebook like a lot of people do, and a video popped up, and I don't know if it was Country Rebel or something, but it was a video they had posted when they were doing Waylon's celebration of life at Opry.
Right.
And on stage was Marty Stewart and Tritt and Hank Jr. And they ended it was a video of the end of the night, and Travis was talking about, at Waylon's service, all he could think about in his head was that song that Hank wrote, The Outlaw's Reward. And then that's what they ended the celebration of life with. And that was the video of the three of them doing that song. And I was like, man, I bet there's a lot of people that don't even know the significance of that song.
Right.
And it was just a moment, we don't, we're running out of artists where that type of celebration and those meaningful songs. I mean, I always joke with John and Kenny about, like Willie's outlived them all.
Yeah.
And there might be something to his lifestyle that we should take note of,
Well, I sure don't mind giving it a try,
Yeah, right.
Kung Fu and herbs,
Yeah. So anyway, I just started.
But that's a good point.
That hole last night, seeing that video of like, I'm gonna go back and listen to that original cut.
Oh, so good. And I've seen that video. So isn't Steve Warner or somebody else on stage with them too? I think it's four of them.
He might have been.
I know Porter Wagner's the one that is kind of doing the MC. Yeah. But what a great, y'all find that on YouTube. And he kind of brings it out of in pure Tritt form. He brings it out of Hank.
Oh man, he put it on you.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Anyway,
but like you said, most of those stories are things we hear. It's in passing on the road. You meet some old timer, they tell you the story. You're sitting at catering, something like that, and that's gold. And that's the heart of this show. Is just everybody's got a story. Everybody's got some tales and some taller than others. And the internet is full of all this information out there. Why not have the people who were actually there? And anybody can ask the artist, and no knock on any of our artist buddies, but just because it's their tour, they may know the littlest amount of what's going on with any given thing that happens with the tour.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's not, that's not a knock. That's just the way things work. Everybody has their assigned position to take care of what responsibilities. Well, the artist is usually press, songs, the show, so then the band gets theirs, the crew gets theirs, we have ours, and everybody does their job. So you really, like I've said this before, somebody will come, I'll hear somebody saying something and they'll be like, let's tell Justin this. And I'm like, wait. Let's wait till after this to tell him that. I don't need nothing in his head right now while we're trying to get through this, whatever. You know what I mean? You pick and choose your stuff, and it's not that you don't want them to know everything. Sometimes they just don't need to know everything for whatever reason a good tour manager would deem I will get it to them some other time, or there's that also leans into the shady world, is which we know there is an element of that amongst our business. It's just like the world. I think that there's more good than bad, but the bad just get the spotlight a lot of times.
Sure. Right.
But so you hear bad horror stories, but good TMs like us, I'm doing nothing but trying to help my artist 24/7, whatever to set him, the crew, the band, everybody up for success. And if that means holding some information until a better time to deliver it, or dealing with it outside of them. So I think that a lot of times people just, because you'll hear artists get asked questions, and they just give a generic basketball halftime game comment because they don't really know, and why would they? But they don't want to say that. So, but all of us on the inside, we know all kinds of stuff, and a lot of it, and none of it's really. And that's what I'd say. This is not there's no gotcha moments on this podcast. I'm not trying to put anybody on blast. I don't have any crazy. If there was something so crazy that the world needed to know, I would tell it. If it was illegal or immoral to the point where I couldn't live without telling it, it would already been told. So you're not going to get any of those stories on here, but you're going to get a really fascinating inside look on some things that have happened. How long you been doing this, Tater? Longer than me. I've been 20-something years. You've got to be pushing 30, huh?
I don't know if it's 30. I'm in
25.
I'm somewhere between 22 and 25. Yeah. I mean, it's
let's
probably
go
right
there
at 20.
then.
I think it's probably right at 22, but yeah.
Well, here's a good
point. To your point on those stories real quick, I tell my wife all the time, she's a part of this organization in Nashville called, Entrepreneur Organization. She's a business owner and entrepreneur. It's a really great organization, and they have forums that they meet once a month, and it's confidentiality. She can't share with me what they talk about and stuff. That's fine, babe. I'm going to the grave with plenty of stuff. I don't need any more. I don't need to take any more with me. I'm going to the grave with it. So.
And then just got to outlive a lot of people.
That's it. Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah, you were.
Because I always told Tracy Lawrence, I got a few good ones, but I'll wait till way after it's. Hopefully nobody will care and tell it on my way out the door too. But they're all just fun rock and roll stuff. I'm gonna have Opie on. Hell, Opie may tell them here in a couple weeks when I have Opie on.
There's a legend. There's a legend.
Oh, dude, I've got him on. They're on a West Coast run, and he was going to try to make it work while he's out there, but he's going to holler at me when he gets back. But yeah, he says in the text, he's like, these people now have no idea what it was like back in the. And Tracy used to call it. He said, "Buddy, y'all don't even know."
No, and you and I don't really.
No, we caught the last glimpse.
We just hear them. Yeah,
we caught the last little glimpse of that. Before the world was on blast and all that kind of stuff in the old school world. There was only one or two artists selling huge venues. You played, nobody was doing stadiums except for Garth, and maybe Straight.
The smartphone changed a lot of things.
I mean, you and I remember, and a lot of people won't remember this, literally the Atlas in between the seat of the van or up in the bus and pulling over to a payphone to call the bar to make sure someone there was to let us in. I mean, and getting some bartender and trying to find some sound guy or something. That's just it's crazy to think back, but that's when we do it. And on that note, I mentioned earlier when we started that you're one of my oldest friends in the music business out in Nashville world. We met. And I'll set it up, but you can tell your part, and I'll see if I remember it the same way, because I've told it a bunch. I may remember it wrong. But we met, this had to have been, I started with Wayne Mills, I think the end of 02 into 03. So this had to be 03, 04, 05 at
would have been 05. It would have been 05.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So in 2005, I'm with the Wayne Mills band. We go to Ruston, Louisiana, Rab Steakhouse, legendary steakhouse / night, big outdoor venue on the back end. Out back, big stage, big cool venue there in Ruston, Louisiana, northern Louisiana. And we're going to open for Gary Allen, who in 05, I mean, Gary's still rocking, but in 05, Gary was still rocking. And that was a big get for us. We had played there, the local club scene and stuff, and we got the nod to come in and do the show. And I'm going to set up merch, and there's a strapping young lad setting up Gary's merch right next to me. and
Yeah.
it's Chris Tate. So we
Yeah.
meet, shake hands on a semi-muddy, cold field in Louisiana, and that was in '05, and that set off. And then we didn't meet again, and we'll get into that. But what do you remember
Yeah.
about the Rustin show?
So the Rustin show, man, was cold.
Yes.
It was really cold. And of course, doing merch, as you know, we're the first out there and we're the last to get to the bus.
Yep.
And I mean, it was cold. Packed house. I remember there was a ton of people there. Remember meeting you. You refreshed my memory on that, but I do remember that now. And then one thing I'll always remember about that show, and I might be wrong, it actually might have been in '06. It might have been in '06. But what I really remember about that show is there was we had a lighting director. Gary had just gotten a lighting package and was carrying a lighting, rig, and it was a younger guy, about the same age of us, Justin Kitchen. And I believe now he's with Luke, been with Luke for several years. But he met a young lady there that night that was from there, and they're married and have
Wow.
two girls. And I just remember like I was there. I was there when they met. I was in the moment. And I'll always just remember that about that show, other than obviously you and everything. But they met there. They got married. They're still married. They have two girls. He's gone off to do big things,
Yeah.
design lighting packages and all that stuff. And but anyway,
That's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah, that's
yeah,
real life stuff. That really happens.
yeah, yeah. That
Love
it
finds a
did.
way.
It dang sure did. Yep.
That's amazing.
So
And yeah, well, of course you wouldn't remember. That would make so much more sense that would be the main memory rather than the local regional opening guy's merch guy. So I tell you what I remembered, and we'll get to how we remembered these memories. But what I
yeah,
remember was, yes, freezing cold. I had rattlesnake boots on, I think, or python boots on, and it was so cold. There's no protection either in those type of boots. They look cool, but man,
yeah,
on grass, cold, wet, semi-frozen grass. I mean, it was 30 something degrees, 40 degrees
yeah,
maybe, and in Louisiana
yeah,
that's cold.
yeah,
And I remember we set up merch, and then we go chain whatever, come back. And then right before Gary, and we do our set, I come back. Right before Gary goes on, I notice you're not there. I look up a few minutes later. Hell, you're on stage. You've
yeah,
got the Garth Brooks earpiece microphone, headset microphone on. I believe a cowboy hat,
yeah. Definitely hat. Yeah,
a belt buckle. You tucked your shirt in by this point. You were belt buckled up, boots and
yeah,
jeans.
yeah.
And I want to say maybe a plaid button-up shirt, pearl snap,
Pearl
yep,
snap.
pearl
Yeah.
snap. Had to have pearl snap. Just checking. And a handful of T-shirts rolled up, and you were getting the crowd pumped up before Gary came out on stage. And I said right then,
Yeah.
I said, "Man, he's cool, but I would never do that. That seems kind of
Now
a
you're
little
the
too."
king of it, though,
How many
son.
jobs can you have on a tour? Yeah, and now that's what I do every night. I go on stage and intro Justin, say similar. I
Yeah,
just don't throw T-shirts out. I just do my
yeah,
ridiculous banter.
yeah.
But I remember that, and I don't remember this part though. And you may or may not. Did you have music out when you were doing that? What was the plan when you would come out for that? How did that get
No,
asked? How was that set up? Was that something you
yeah,
initiated? Was it them, management?
yeah. So no, I mean, I never had any music. And we can go into how I got going and everything if you
Yeah.
want here, because
Yeah,
it'll lead up
we
to.
can go back and let's just go from the beginning. So, because I was going to
Yeah,
ask that next, how long would this have been
yeah,
in your career at this point?
yeah, yeah. So you want me to start at the beginning, or what
Yeah,
do you
just
want
do
to?
that. Let's
Yeah,
just go to the top. Where did Tater come
yeah.
from? How did Tater get in the
So
music business? Origin
y-
story, like a Marvel superhero you are.
yeah, so as you know, everybody's got their unique story of how we got in this crazy business and life and everything. And I grew up in a small town in Kansas, just outside of Wichita, and ended up going to a college there and playing baseball, which was a wonderful experience. And when I went there as a freshman, the school stuff came up, and it was like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. I came here to play baseball, and they're like, okay, well, what do you like? And at the time, I was like, oh, I like Sports Center. And they're like, okay, how about sports broadcasting? I was like, sure. So I went down that avenue, and that led to I became the public address announcer and DJ for all the events and sporting events except baseball, because obviously we were I was on the team, and so the basketball games I was the guy announcing the starting lineups. I was playing music. I had burnt CDs and a CD player. I'd have songs queued up. I'd have all the stuff.
I
And
love it.
so I did that through college, and then I had an intern my senior year, and I had to do an internship at a TV station, which I did, and then I did another one at the local country radio station with a guy named Dan Holliday on KZSN 102.1. And that's how I kind of started to get a little introduction to the music business. Met some promo reps, which I learned what that was.
Yep.
Like I remember Rascal Flatts coming and doing the listener appreciation show. I remember a girl
What
named
year?
Rachel.
What year would this have been?
This would have been in '01, most likely, and 2000 into '01
Okay.
would have been that semester. Um, and so, Brian McComas coming to town, just, all these people, learning what promo reps did. And so fast forward, um, and, we're in the regional finals for baseball. Missed my college graduation because we were one game away from the World Series. Ended up winning like the biggest award possible and at the school, but I wasn't there to get it. Had no idea I was getting it or anything. And so fast forward, we lose the game and it's over, like baseball's over. And for me, it was always sports and music, right? And so it was a really tough time. And I remember we had gotten tickets to Kenny Chesney on his CMT tour, like his first big headlining. Young was the single that was out. And it was just, I mean, he was just doing this,
Rocket
right?
ship.
Rocket ship. And so me and some buddies had gotten like, I don't know, second row tickets, whatever. And so we're going to the show, and out front the arena was this dually pickup with a trailer behind it, like a gooseneck trailer, and it had CMT all over it, country music television. And there was a guy and a girl, with microphones, throwing out T-shirts, kind of warming up the crowd, stuff. And I looked and I said, well, I could do that. I'd like to know what that is. So we go to the show. The next morning, I called the guy that I had interned with, Dan Holiday, and I said, hey, man, do you know anybody at CMT? And he was just like, I don't. And he said, but I know somebody at MTV in New York, which owns CMT, Viacom. And he said, why? And I said, well, we went to the show, saw this, and I just, I'm kind of interested on all that. And he goes, okay. He goes, well, he gave me the name and number of the guy to call. And he said, you're probably going to have to leave a message and maybe they'll call you back, but that's as good as I got. I said, cool. So I did that and left a message. And about an hour later, this lady calls me back from Nashville. And she was like, hey, we got your voicemail from so and so in New York. I'm with CMT, so like, what do you need? Like, what can we help you with? I said, oh wow, like I said, I'm really surprised somebody called me back, but thank you. Here's the deal. Went to the show, saw this. I did something similar through college. I'm sure you're not hiring, but I just wanted to introduce myself and inquire about this. And she was just like, wow, okay. Well, you went through some steps to get here. And I said, yeah, and so we spoke, and she was just like, well, you're right. We're not hiring, but this is, there's three of these trucks. We have one on the West Coast, one in the Midwest, one on the East Coast. they travel around, some on tours, they go to other places promoting, doing grassroots marketing for CMT. And she said, but send me your resume and, I'll keep it on file here. And if something ever comes up, we'll get a hold of you. And I was like, okay, thank you. And um, at that point, I realized, okay, that's just going to sit in a pile,
Yeah.
So I saved the number on a piece of paper and her name. And I called her every month for about 2 years just to check in and say, hey, how was your Thanksgiving or,
Yeah.
whatever. And one day she called me and said, hey, we've had somebody quit unexpectedly. And I know you've been interested in this for a long time. And we'd like to fly you here for an interview. And she was like, if I get a plane ticket for you, can you come here for an interview and we'll fly you back the same day? I don't know where you are with your job or anything, but she's like, I at least want to give you this opportunity. And I said, yes, I can do it. And at that time, I was a loan officer for like a high risk, company,
Yeah.
and most of the time I was going around knocking on doors trying to figure out why people were delinquent on their payment.
Right.
Not really a great thing to be doing.
Right. And not really what your career ambitions you had set out
No,
to accomplish.
no. I mean, just waiting to get to the wrong house where the guy's been laid off, wife
Yeah.
left him, and I'm sitting there asking him for his payment for his big screen TV or
Yeah.
something. It's
And
like,
he's drunk with a
oh yeah,
shotgun. Oh yeah.
you know it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, so I was just like, yes, I can do it, whatever. And so she's like, okay, we'll have a plane ticket for you on Monday. Blah blah blah. And so we got all the details. They flew me here, took a cab for the first time ever downtown to
And where'd
Commerce
you fly
Street,
from?
Wichita.
Wichita. You flew from which you were still
Yep.
around home.
Oh yeah, yep. Still there, living with some old, college baseball teammates, and we all had a house together, and that's what I was doing. And then, so yeah, they flew me here. I interviewed, flew me back, and that was on a Monday. And then they called me the next day and said, "Hey, we want to offer you this job, but here's the deal. We're gonna fly you here next Monday. Um, you'll be gone for the rest of the year. You're going to be on the truck in the Midwest, but we'll got to fly you here to Nashville, get you boarded, get you some training with the truck and all that stuff." And they were like, can you have everything in place to be here on a Monday and know you're not going to be back till December. And this was like in April of '03.
Wow.
And I was just like, yeah, I mean, I've waited this long. That's no problem. Yeah, it's fine.
Yep.
So that was kind of the deal, and everybody where I worked knew what was going on. And so, I finished out that day and, then took the next day off to kind of get stuff together and then, worked the next 2 days, half a day on that Friday. And then, yeah, that was it. Monday, I was on a plane and
Did
gone.
you send did you have much stuff to send? Did you send stuff to Nashville? Did you move there or you just left your stuff
No,
there and took a
left.
backpack?
Yeah, took a really big suitcase
Suitcase, yeah.
and just that was it, and I still paid rent, with my buddies for the rest of that year because I didn't know what was going to
Right.
happen, and I didn't want to leave him high and dry and all that. So yeah, I mean, I didn't. So I did that for 2 years.
So you fly to
Uh,
Nashville on a Monday
yep,
and then they onboard you, get you set up with everything you need. How long before you left to go on your first assignment?
I was here that week.
1 week
Yep.
and then you're on the road. What was your first gig you had to go to?
First gig was in Oklahoma City at a fair, and I can't remember the act that was playing, but you know, we would go set up like for a week at a fair or something, and and do all that, and it's like part of the training in Nashville was obviously being comfortable with driving the truck, pulling a trailer, and backing up. And I tell my dad to this date, like the best life lesson I could tell him that he probably taught me that has gotten me this far in my career, I guess, would be backing up a trailer.
Absolutely. I say the
He
same
taught me,
thing. Yeah, my
yeah,
dad
like, I
let me
mean,
back the boat trailer in or do
boat,
something, even
yep,
in a little truck with a little trailer, but still it was enough to get the mindset for driving a van and trailer.
yeah, yeah. And like, and so, I enjoyed that. I always wanted to, park the truck and the trailer wherever we were at. And, some
Yeah.
of those fairs, it's pretty tight stuff. And so,
And you get a good spot too. You don't have to park way out in
yeah,
the parking lot like you used
right,
to.
right,
Yeah, you get the
right.
backstage parking, get you some credentials. Oh man, you're in the big
All the
leagues,
stuff.
baby.
Yeah. And so then the first tour we were on was the last Brooks and Dunn Neon Circus tour.
Wow.
And so we were out there for that because CMT was one of the sponsors. And on that tour was obviously Brooks and Dunn. And then Cletus T. Judd was the MC, who to this day is one of my closest friends. Um,
Got a text from him and Gossett the other day. He wants to come on the show, so we'll
oh
have him on
yeah,
soon.
he'd
Yes.
be good. He'll be good. And so that's where I met him. And then Jeff Bates was an opening act,
Yep.
an artist by the name of Aaron Lyons from
Yep.
Canada, Brad Paisley, and then direct support was a trio called Rascal Flats.
Wow.
And so we did that tour, and then Flats went on to headline their first tour, which was sponsored by CMT. So we went from that right into that, and you know, it was great. It was a great experience. That's kind of how I got into everything because on that Flats tour, the middle act was Chris Cagle, who had a tour manager by the name of Jeff Gossett.
Wow. So here's the tie-in. This
So
at the
there's
same
the
time.
time.
Yep. So
And
Gossett is
so
with
we, yeah,
Cagle at this
and
time.
yeah, and so we hit it off. And that CMT job, at the time you could only do it for 2 years. Was all the longer they wanted people because you're just gone, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and they just it was a 2 year contract, and so I did that in '03 and '04, and towards the end of '04, I was telling Jeff, like because we would be in Nashville a lot. We would just stay at the Hampton Inn on West End because I had a big parking lot and we could park the truck there and everything. And so anyway, Jeff and I, would golf together and we stayed in contact, you know, just hit it off. And so, I told him like, I think I'm gonna move here. Yeah, I mean, this is where I've made all my connections. And so I moved in with him when he lived down in Spring Hill in January of '05. So that's officially when I got here. But I'll say that to wrap this up, the coolest moment with that job, there were several, but probably the coolest moment in that job for me that made it full circle was, during that time and before I got that, like I said, Chesney was just on the Sky, rocket ship,
Mm-hmm.
and he had won, a big. I was watching the CMT awards. I worked part time at a golf course, with my other job. I would do the golf course job too, and we were watching the CMT awards, and he won the big award, and he'd given his speech about, hey, I just want to say if there's anybody out there that's got a dream, whether it be music, whatever, just don't stop trying because, it can happen, and so that really kept me going. And then we end up on a show with Chesney with the truck and David Farmer and Tamburino and those guys, they treated us like family, gave us laminates,
Nice.
all the stuff. And so we're backstage and he's about to go on and Farmer's like, hey, come over here. Do you guys do the shot with us before we go on stage? We go over there and Kenny comes out, he sees us and David introduced us. And I got to tell him, I was like, hey, I want to just tell you, I saw you on this award show and you had said this and I'd been trying to get this job for a long time and it happened and he was very nice about it. He's like, man, he's like, that's what it's about, man.
Yep.
And so then they invited us in to do their crown shot and everything. And, I'm 23 years old, whatever, 24. I'm just like, dang, like,
I want to be in on this action regularly.
Yeah, well, I was just like, this just happened, I
Yeah,
was just like,
this is
wow.
happening. I'm here. Here I am doing a shot with
Yeah.
Chesty, and he's
So
the
that
one
was,
told me to keep going.
yeah, right. So that was cool, just a full circle moment. And then, you know, moving in with Jeff, and, that's kind of where it all came full circle right
And
there.
so when you were living with Jeff, he was TMing for Cagle at the time?
He was at the time, and then, Cagle just had to cancel everything.
Yeah.
He had voice problems, and he had to just stop. So Jeff went with, in his podcast, he mentioned the acts that, he was with. I
Yep.
think he might have went with, maybe John Michael at the time,
Sounds
or
about
Josh
right.
Grayson at the time, somewhere around there. And so he had been helping Cletus. And so I moved to town, and I got nothing. Like, I mean, just nothing. The UNT gig was done. And that, I'm just literally starting from nothing.
Looking for work.
We're looking for work. And so then I hopped in with Cletus and went out and helped him, for about a year or so. And as Jeff went on to do, what he mentioned in his episode, whether
And so
it was Julie Roberts.
Yeah, with Cletus though, is that just him doing comedy stand-up stuff? So it's just you
It was
two
a mix
traveling?
of stuff. Yeah, it was just us. It was a mix of stuff. At that time, he was on tour with Trace Atkins and Montgomery Gentry when they were doing their headlining thing, and they would flip-flop headliners. He was on that. And then, yeah, we were doing some clubs in between, which was rough. Comedy clubs are not easy because they're not set up for what he does, at
Right.
the time, But he had great crowds. I mean, people loved it.
Yeah.
But
It's just tough playing those clubs, especially when you've gotten to a level and you got the notoriety and the fans. I mean, it's just tough. Like you said, facilities, and that world's caught up. But, a lot of times it was either kind of the same in the music club world. It's really a really nice club, or the majority are just smaller, can be rough,
Yeah, and with him, he sings along and sings and needed wedges and music being played in those clubs at that time, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. I mean, they're just used to acts standing there with a microphone. And he was bringing a whole different thing to it, which was funny, and it, was great. And he had,
but they didn't have the sound, the PA and the stuff.
No, the wedges, and I'm not a sound guy, I don't advance production at all. I'm like, you need to talk to so-and-so.
Yes, I do. I know just enough to be dangerous and wreck our whole system.
Yeah. We carry racks and stacks. We're good. Yeah.
Yeah. We got our looms and that thing over there.
Yeah. We got a snake.
I've been doing 20-something years, and I'll ask one of the young crew people, hey, I hear y'all say this word all the time. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's not our world. We've talked about that. Some people come from the production, and some people don't. There's all kinds of ways to get to the finish line. Everybody's got their. I tell Justin, it's like I don't know if anybody remembers the X-Men and superhero baseball cards they used to have, like the comic book character cards, and on the back it would have their attributes. It'd be like their stats would be on a baseball card, except for it was their attributes. It'd be like, strength, mental powers, durability, whatever their stamina, whatever their different things. They'd have different ratings. So I think everybody's that, and it doesn't matter which rating you have, higher or lower. It's just your combination rating that works for what your superpower is, because it's like Incredible Hulk, super strong, so he doesn't need to be super fast, He's so kind of thing. But everybody has their strong suits for sure, and you coming from that background of broadcasting. And being in a pub, you had no fear of public speaking. You had no fear of talking and being in front of people. You didn't mind engaging the conversation with a club owner or a buyer or whoever to get things done and ask for things. Some people still, I know people that have been in this business and still will ask, hey, can you call a runner? And I'm like, well, you have the numbers right there. Well, I don't want to talk to them. And it's like, you should be able to talk to a runner, But,
So
but that's
back
just the
to
way it works.
Yeah, and like when you were bringing up, that Gary Allen show and seeing me up there, so that's where that's.
Where does the gap go there between Cletus into working for Gary Allen?
Yeah, so So what happened there was, Cletus, man, he got on a run where he did morning radio and the big station down in Tampa.
With Bubba.
Yeah, the big station down in Tampa um, hired him to come down there and be the Cletus T. Judd, you know, morning show.
Right.
And he crushed it, and he did good. But he moved down there, and so that was going to be what he did. And so, when that I was kind of back to the deal of like looking for work again, and Jeff was like, I think your next step, now is going to be merch. It's going to get you out there. It's going to get you a little taste of everything. And he had introduced me to Jeremy Deloach at Richards and Southern and Todd Casey, brother Todd. And so I met with those guys, and this was kind of towards the tail end of the touring season, right? So there wasn't much going on, but they had me come up, and I was doing inventory in the warehouse, like the acts were coming off the road for the year, and we were just getting everything counted of what they had left and all that stuff. And then the guy that had been doing merch for Gary Allen, was coming off the road, and Jeremy and Todd were like, "Hey, we're going to send you out with Gary Allen." And Terry Cologne and they had known what I did for CMT, and they had told John Lytle about it, Gary's manager. And so they wanted that, when I went out with Gary, they wanted somebody to, go up on stage and, obviously push his merchandise and intro him and everything. So we had a big intro made and, all that stuff. And that's what you saw there in Ruston. And it was great. It was fun. It was back to doing stuff that I enjoyed and was used to doing. And yeah. And so
And it put you on the road full time. You got to be on the bus. You got to be on the bus. You got to do the whole band, the crew. Gary had a big team at the time. Probably how many? 3-4 buses at that time, probably.
He had 2 buses and had added a semi.
And a semi.
And the front part was merch.
Yep.
And so that was my first time of getting there, like really organized stuff. And then he went out on tour with a trio called Rascal Flatts. So here I was back again.
Yep.
With those guys, and I'd gotten to know the crew, very well.
That makes it so much easier when you already know the camp.
Yeah, and so it was a fun summer. That was in summer of 06, to be back out, and one of those guys, John Garber, he and his wife, I was in their wedding. They were in my wedding, me and my wife's wedding, and so yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that's, where we were. And then that, kind of ran its course, and Gary was taken off and stuff. And of course we still needed to work, and Richards and Southern sent me out with a artist named Trent Tomlinson.
Trent, what a songwriter. I mean, great artist too. He did
great live show. I mean,
yes.
I put him up with anybody. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
he on stage was strong, man. It was a really good show.
Yeah, and he had that Jansen energy.
Yeah,
but he was jacked at the time. He'd go shirtless. Yeah. And he had that look with all that hair, and he was dark.
Never worked out, and he never worked out.
He just had
his dad played basketball at Mizzou and was just a brick. I mean, he was a bull, man, and just genetics. But Trent worked a lot. I mean, we were playing every bar and club and radio show. I mean, he was at that point. But during that time, with Gary, we were doing a lot of fairs and festivals, and we happened to do a lot of shows with an act called Blake Shelton.
Yep. And
I got to know his merch guy at the time, who was a high school buddy of his. And we stayed in touch, and everything. And one of the last shows we did with him, he was telling me that, he had a little boy, and he was like, I'm probably going to come off the road. Would you be interested in this when I come off the road? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm like a big Blake fan, still am, like his music just always, uh, hit me, you know, like I just always, you know, gravitated towards his sound. And so anyway, fast forward, I'm out with Trent, you know, and we get into the beginning of the year. Nobody's working. I'm back up at Richards and Southern, helping them with inventory, you know, trying to make some money, you know, stay alive in the wintertime, as
Yep.
we all say. And Jeremy calls me into his office, Jeremy Deloach, and he says, "Hey, you know, we're going to switch things up for you this year. Um, we got two acts. We're going to leave it up to you. One's a female act, one's a male act." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you know, tell me about them." And the male act was obviously Blake, you know. So they're like, "Hey, well, we've signed Blake Shelton and his guys coming off the road. You know, that's one act we want you to consider." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me about the female act." And they're like, "Okay, it's a younger female. Parents are out there, going to be on a couple tours, and you know, not sure where it's going to lead to, but you know, just being that type of environment with the parents out there, we feel like you would fit with them if that's a direction you want to go." And I was like, "Okay." And like, what has she got going on? She got one single out now, you know, it's doing okay. And I said, "Okay, what's that act?" And oh yeah, Taylor Swift. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, you know, I don't know about that, you know, with the parents out there, and
And you're already a
you know,
big Blake fan.
and it's teenage." And I had already told, you know, Blake's, you know, old guy that, you know, I would take it over. And I said, "Well," I said, "I'll probably go with the Blake gig." And they're like, "Okay, well, you know, that's good," because they had asked for you anyway. And so, so then I go out with him and you know, end up riding the bus with him and Kevin Kennedy, tour manager at the time. And that was some of the best times of my life, man, just because Blake was so easygoing
Yep.
and funny. And you know, our deal was I'd get in after counting out merch, and he'd give me the iPod and say, "Man, start playing some music." And it was just all the good country songs,
Right.
you know. It was
Yeah.
just that's what he wanted, you know. And we would stay up till hours just listening,
Yep.
you know.
That's the best. Oh yeah.
And it was just so much fun, you know. And so, you know, I'm with him, and then you know, fast forward several months later, and you know, another guy lived with us with Jeff and I, and he worked for Dirks and did merch for Dirks Bentley. And he called me and said, "Hey, we might have an opportunity here if you're interested." Um, and I was like, "Well, what is it?" And he was just like, "Well, Dirks just signed a big, you know, sponsorship deal for Bud Light, and they're looking for somebody to kind of be the liaison between Dirks and Bud Light at shows. And I know you've done sponsorship stuff before with CMT, so you know, I was going to put your name in the hat." And I was just like, I was really happy with Blake, but I didn't really work for Blake, you know.
Yeah. You were still working for Richards and Southern,
Yeah, and it was always going to be that way, you know.
which for people who
And
don't know, Richards and Southern is one of the biggest merchandise companies in the world, in
yeah,
Nashville for
yeah,
certain.
yeah. I mean, they've had all of them. I mean,
Yep.
and have the big ones, right?
Yeah, that's currently who we're with, Richard and Southern still, obviously.
Sure, right.
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
Todd Casey earlier. I talked Todd. You know, he's living over in Destin now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. He left South Florida and they moved up to
Yeah,
Destin. Yeah,
couldn't handle
yeah.
that South Florida. He said nobody could understand his Kentucky accent. He had to get up the Panhandle where people could understand him. And I think he had some health stuff, and I think he's doing much better. So shout out, brother
Yeah,
Todd Casey
yeah,
and his wife
yeah.
Leslie. Hope y'all are doing great. We
He's
miss you. We
another
love you.
legend. He's another legend.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
and so anyway, I meet with Dirks and everything, and I decide to jump ship and I go do the sponsorship, you know, with Dirks, which was great. You know, I went to St. Louis to Budweiser and met with those people, which was the first real big time thing I'd ever done. I'm like,
Yeah,
dang, you know, like this is legit. Like,
yeah.
wow, you know. And so, you know, I did that for about a year and a half, and then Budweiser sells, and and then I get the call of like their job dropping the program, you know. And you know, Dirks personally calls me. But Dirks is, man, he's up there as
Oh
far
yeah,
as,
oh yeah.
you know, he's probably one of the, if not the best in the business as far as the way he treats his people, he takes care of his people, he I mean, we still text to this day. He'll
Yep.
text me back. He got me going on the cold plunges one year, but so that kind of did its thing, and then once again I'm back to like, well, okay, now what? And I had done everything, but really tour man. I mean, Cletus was tour managing, but it wasn't tour managing in the aspect of a crew and a band and a
Right.
bus and drivers and everything. And Cagle was back working at the time, and his tour manager had left. And so Jeff, was like,
Yep.
hey, man, I can call Cagle personally and get you a meeting. And he was managed by Doc McGee at the time, the legend Doc McGee.
Legend.
And so he set that up, met with Cagle, and that was my dive into tour managing with a full band and a crew and drivers and the whole thing. And so
And
jumped
Cagle,
in.
and you already knew some back on him because you'd already knew him. But boy, he's a handful too. Still a very passionate singer. We've done some shows with him the last couple of years, and he's still just a great singer. Has great songs. But just he's passionate, buddy. And talking to him backstage, he's usually. I mean, he's on it, buddy. And he's a ball of fun, and like I said, just a great country singer, Texas guy. But I can imagine, and anybody I've ever known that's ever worked with him, boy, they had some good stories about some fun times out on the road with Cagle.
Yeah, man, he was great. He was really great with me. Obviously there's those stories, that we've all heard, about things and the passion you talk about. But, he was really great with me. He just wanted an hour heads up before meet and greet, and then he wanted a 30-minute reminder before meet and greet. And man, I'd go up there, 5 minutes before, and he'd be sitting on the bus, dressed, hat on. I mean, I never had to tell him like, hey man, we got to go, like he was on it,
I had never been quite that fortunate with any, with any of my.
Now that's just one,
Yeah, right. And no kidding. Yeah. So you mean with him, you didn't have to go back and assume they were up because you knew they were up earlier, and then you do the look underneath the door of the back lounge to see if there's dark or if there's any shadows moving, and you think, well, maybe they're just resting up. Let me go. And then with 5 or 10 minutes out, you knock and you realize, and you hit the little door and opens up, and you realize they are completely asleep. And we've got to adjust time.
We're in a holding pattern.
Yeah, we're got JR for Jeff. We're gonna have to push back 5. Let's push start back 5.
Play another song. Another song.
Let's go on and make it 10. Let's push back 10. So, but a lot of stuff, you just never know. And some people, like John Party, prime example. I remember when we were running hard doing his radio tour, and that is just an exhausting experience.
Boy, isn't it? Yeah.
Minimal sleep. If you get to get horizontal and get some rest at some point, it's just a luxury, because usually you're sitting up in a van or in an airplane seat or something. But I can remember us, when we'd get to a hotel or something, we just drop our stuff. I'm like, all right, we got to be down there. 5 minutes. The van's, the radio or the rep or whoever's picking us up, and he's like, I got to lay down for a second. I was like, dude, we don't have time. He's like, well, we have 15 minutes. I'm going to lay down for 9 minutes, and I'll be ready to go. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not going to lay down for 9 minutes. You're not going to lay down and rest for 9 minutes and wake right back up. But sure enough, I could go to my room. By the time I'd get back, I'd say, as soon as I'd crack the door, before I could get, hey, buddy, out of my mouth, he jumps up, all right, I'm ready to go now. And I'm like, that's rare, because usually if you lay down for a second, you are groggy trying to get back up. But he could bounce back, and he literally needed sometimes 5 minutes to lay there. And I've done that later on. I can go lay in my bunk and get still for 10 minutes and not fall asleep when it's hot and you're a busy day on site, and get your eyes closed and just let your body reset for a second. And it does work. But yeah, they're all tight. So with Cagle, he was very punctual. Well, that was good. And and y'all were rocking shows, I'm sure, because he's always done good numbers, and because again, he's got a great voice, always kept a great band around him, great songs. So you're out there doing the gig with Cagle. This would have been about, what year would this been at this point?
This would have been probably the middle of '08.
'08. Okay. All right. So you're on this gig. How long does this
Yep.
gig last?
So that gig lasted almost 2 years. Um, while I was out there, there was a new artist coming up that somebody had hit me up about, saying, "Hey, you should keep an eye on this one." Um, it's managed by, he's managed by Doug and Trey, which were Rascal Platts' managers at the time, Doug Nichols and Trey Turner, and who I had known, from
Yeah.
the dang Brooks and Dunn tour, in
Right.
'03, right? And so, it's a guy named Easton Corbin. And so, I was watching his single, A Little More Country Than That. You
Great
know, it,
song.
it, it came out in '09, and it was like the second coming of Strait at the time. People
Yep.
were like, it sounds like George Strait, whatever. And so I was keeping an eye on it. And then, I'd run into Doug Nichols somewhere. We got talking about it, and he's just like, "Man, we're doing the radio stuff right now, but it's when it's time, we're gonna need somebody." And he's like, "I'm gonna call you," and I was like, "Okay." And sure enough, he did. And this would have been, probably early spring of 2010. And the single went number one, and then on his number one party for A Little More Country Than That is the same day that I met with Easton and Doug and made it official that I was going to
Wow.
go out on the road with him. Yeah.
Good timing. And during this time is when you and
Yeah.
I reconnect. We're
Yes.
at CRS week. We're in a
Yeah.
suite upstairs shuttling artists through. By this time, I'm with John Party. I would say this is probably 11,
Okay. Yep.
maybe. I'm with John Party. We're walking through, talking to people, and I see Easton come through because I was aware of who he was, hadn't met him yet. Big fan, like
Yeah.
you were, loved his
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
And I noticed this guy walking behind him, and I do a double take, and I said, and then I didn't bother you right then, but you stepped off, and he was talking, and when you were free for a second, I said, "Hey, did you used to work for Gary Allen?" And you were like, "Yeah." And I pulled up my phone, and I had Gary Allen still in my phone, and you pull out, and you had J.R. Wayne Mills in your phone still from that, and you were like, "Holy crap!"
Flip phones. Flip phones.
Flip phones, yes. I think at the time I had a BlackBerry. This might have been the BlackBerry
Ooh.
day. I
Ooh.
might have had the BlackBerry because I could
Okay.
email with
Yeah.
it. Didn't have anybody to
Right.
email hardly yet, but I
Right.
could email if I needed to. Just look pro.
Yeah.
Look like I was. That's the thing. I never was a great tour manager, still not, but I look like
I
it.
think
I
I
look
got
like I
a.
know
I
what I'm
think I
doing.
got a. I think I upgraded after I saw you had one. I was like, get a BlackBerry.
Yeah, that was an upgrade between my flip phone, my Razor, and a Palm Pilot. Because before
Oh.
I had a
Yeah.
Palm Pilot, so I could do note with Wayne. I had that, and it would take pictures also. Before you had a
Uh-huh.
phone with a picture of the Palm Pilot, they were terrible, but at least
Yeah.
I could get some pictures.
Yeah.
We catch up, and we're like, I'm like, "Who are you
Yeah.
with?" He's like, "I'm Easton's tour manager." I'm like, "I'm with this new kid on Capitol, John Party,"
Yeah.
and we reconnect. I still have you as Gary
Gary
Allen on
Allen.
my phone. Yes, of
Keep
course.
it that
Yes,
way. Keep it
always.
that way.
And
Original.
but we reconnect then, and we're like, all right, let's catch up soon because we know we're going to be running the same
Yep.
circles. You're with a hot
Yep.
act, I'm with a new one, so we're sure we'll be in the same, system here soon. And then that was it. Then we've seen each other every month or couple of months for the last. So that would have been 11. So the past 14 years,
Yeah.
we've been buddies in Nashville since then. We didn't, and like I've said on here before, and our friends talk amongst ourselves, unless you're on the same tour, you're not going to see your other buddies in Nashville
No.
because when you're always off on different days or home or got other obligations when you are home, and you just don't get to see each other that much off the road. You'll see
Right.
your friends in Nashville at a festival faster than you will somewhere in Nashville. That's just the way it
Yeah.
always works. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's why, I mean, the award shows and stuff like that, I always enjoyed just because that was the time to see
Same.
everybody was in one place,
Same. Yes. And
But
I
yeah.
used to love doing those with John. I went to a few with Justin. Obviously, he doesn't do them anymore, so
Yeah.
I miss that.
Yeah. We did. Yeah. Same. I mean, I went with Kenny to the ACMs 3 or 4 years ago was the last one we went to. He was doing something out there, so I rolled with him. But yeah,
Yeah.
but
And then Easton, and you're with Easton for a good
yep.
long while.
Yeah.
And then that transitions into, I get a call from you. Oh, you can tell us the year, but I get a call from you, like, I'm making a move. I'm not with Easton anymore. I'm
Yeah.
going to go work with Big and Rich.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, well, how about that? And it was a shock
Yeah.
because you'd been with Easton a long time at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It was 8 years with Easton, and man, we did a lot of. I mean, we worked a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah.
We did every
Oh, yeah.
as you
Easton doesn't
know.
have, historically not married, doesn't have kids. That guy will go work.
Yeah. I mean, we every radio show you could think of, which, as you know, are Tuesdays and Wednesdays during the week, sometimes on a Monday, and then we're back out, you know, for the regular shows over the weekend. And we did a lot of wonderful things, man. I mean, it was a good experience. We
Absolutely.
did some cool stuff. We did a Flats tour again, and Justin was on there. We did
Yep.
a Blake tour. Justin was on there. We did Paisley a few times. Justin was on there.
Yep.
So it was just like that circle you're staying in. And then, it's just as this business is, it just kind of things run their course and times run out. And I was just gone all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
and
Well, and people
and
don't, and it's not, you hear the stories and you would think, everybody's got their same band, their same crew, their whole career. That's very rare. I mean,
very,
to get 8 years with one act is a milestone. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like I'm a rarity because I've only worked for 3 or 4 artists ever, and I've been doing it 20
yeah,
something years.
yeah,
Most move around because things change. Like you're saying, hope none of this ever happens, but when you have vocal problems or you just have to be abruptly stopped for whatever reason,
yeah,
family situations, you've got kids, you've got things you need to do, career stuff, you want to do a different this, you want to scale down. I mean, there's all kind of different scenarios why things change with the artist and the individual within that camp, that things are what they
yeah,
are. You may decide you're
yeah,
done. I got a kid, you come off that. They can't wait for you for a year to come back on the road. They get somebody to fill the spot. It's time to come back. Don't have that spot anymore. They don't really want to just give it up. Well, you find a new gig and you're with, even if you don't
yeah,
think, you may go into another business for 2 years and then get back into music. I mean,
yeah,
it's just, that's very common. And I would say it's the rarity to be with, a guitar player who's been with an act for 30 years is so rare. Same with a tour
rare,
manager,
yeah,
any of
yeah,
that. So things just happen. Things just run their course.
yeah. With us, the deal with Mercury had gone away,
Yep.
right? And so, it was just kind of like, man, you go and do all this stuff for these 8 years, and then that happens, and it's like,
Yep.
are we starting over,
Yeah.
And
Well, that's
and
the
I
same with
was just,
John and I. When I left John, I went and worked for Justin, and he was going to take a month or 2 off to go hunting in South Africa. Well, I couldn't be off for 2 months. Needed something to
sure,
do. I got him he really needed a production manager to make sure he had an album out on the charts. I was trying to half-ass be the production guy. We had to get
yeah,
somebody that could handle that. So it worked out. It wasn't, I wanted to leave John. I was
yeah,
mad at John. He wasn't mad at me. That's just like, again, things just happen. And I wasn't going to say,
yeah,
well, you can't go hunting with your dad on this once in a
yeah,
lifetime hunt because me and these knuckleheads need a job for a month. I mean, it just
right,
is what it is. So,
yeah, yeah. And so, with him, that's kind of where it was at. The deal had gone away, and there's change in management, and there was just all this stuff, and I was just, I don't
you're
want to
like
use the
200
word.
something dates on the road a year. I'm like, yeah, maybe I could look for something else.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, it was definitely a lot of that, just the unknown of like, man, because it was just like you go and do all that stuff for those many years, and then it never really panned out, to the next level, so to speak. And so I decided to just quit. I didn't have another gig. I didn't have anything lined up. I was just at a point where Chris Tate needed some Chris Tate time.
Yep.
Like I didn't want to answer a phone call. I didn't want to set another bus call time. I didn't want to call another promoter to advance a show. I
You're
just
like,
needed
I don't care what everybody's going to eat for lunch and dinner in
no,
this.
yeah. I need to just step back here and have some time for myself. And thank God I did. And I got, a few calls right off the bat from some people in our circle, and it was with acts that I knew were going to be. They had a lot going on at the time, but it was going to be, work. I mean, it was going to be radio stuff, and it was going to be, every festival and fair and nightclub in the country and a tour here and there, and I just didn't want to do that at the time.
Right.
So about a month goes by, and a guy calls me, Eric Hood, who was Easton's monitor guy in the beginning. Well, he was the monitor guy for Big and Rich, and he called me and he said, "Hey, man, I hear you're not with Easton." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I just kind of been, taking some time." He's like, "You got anything lined up?" And I was just like, "No, I'm just kind of taking my time here, and he was just like, "Well, our tour manager's leaving, and this is what we do. This is about as many dates as we do, and um, John and Kenny typically fly in and fly out, type of deal. Is that something you'd want to, talk? It's a salary gig. It's whatever." And I said, "Yeah." I said, I'll meet with management if like that sounds okay." And so I met with the manager Charlie Panaccio and Panera Bread on West End. We went and met,
Nice.
and yeah, and he just kind of told me like, "Hey, John and Kenny, they just want to do this number of dates, and they want to be home as long as they can, and they want to get back as quick as they can, and so they're not going to get on the bus at midnight and go. They're going to fly in the day of, and if we have another show, they'll ride the bus to that show, and then we'll fly home or something. But it's about and it was a pretty good deal, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot." And here we are 7 years later, and thank God I did, because honestly, I probably wouldn't be married or have a kid
Right.
had that phone call not happened, because it allowed me to be home. Jolene, my wife, and I had known each other for 12 years, but a lot of that time was during those 8 years with Easton where I was just gone. And she's a business owner, and she was starting her business up, and there just wasn't the schedule, to
Right.
be together. And so, you know, the Big and Rich gig allowed me to be home more, and we always stayed in touch, and we, you know, started hanging out more and more. And then 2020 happens, and the quarantine happens, and she was just like, "I don't want to quarantine by myself." And I was like, "I don't want to quarantine by myself." And so we quarantined together, and then that led to, the engagement, and we got married pretty quick in 2020, and we had our son, and it all goes back probably the Big and Rich gig. I mean, had I not taken that gig, that probably didn't happen.
Right. You wouldn't have had the time. You wouldn't have been off. You wouldn't have,
No,
had the freedom and flexibility to attempt these
exactly.
things.
Yep.
And that's a big part of it is the free time, having a manageable workload. Some people want to be gone all the time and live and not and have a storage building, and some of us, it was okay for a little while. Now we've moved on past that
Yeah.
at this stage in our career. Well, that's interesting, because I didn't know, and we've known each other that long, and there's a few of those gaps in there where I didn't actually even know. And then it's funny, like you mentioned, that all this the so many tie-ins, because when you're mentioning the Flats tour and the Blake tour, I'm like, that was a lot of Justin's early tours. By the time Flat
Yep.
was huge, he was out opening for them, and Blake, and you were there with them kind of on their way up, and just all the connections there. It's just fascinating, really. And then for us to reconnect with the young artist in Nashville after all those years in a cold field in Louisiana. I mean, just I was so looking forward to telling this story and talking about this when you came on as a guest, because people ask, how'd you get there? This is all parts of that story, and it's so many of them. It's so many little tidbits to add to things
Yeah.
that make up the grand story. And there's still a pile of stuff in yours that you left out for time's sake, that
Oh
or
yeah.
we just forgot because you can't remember everything.
No.
And
No.
then we end up working for two artists, like you worked for John and Kenny, which I've known them since the days
Yep.
of out at White's Creek at the
Yeah.
Richard's Cafe and all that
Music
stuff.
Mafia.
The Misfits and all that stuff. I
Yeah.
was living in White's Creek, Tennessee, right where they all were congregating all the time. So all those connections, and then with Wayne Mills. And then now we both work for these artists that are outspoken, conservative, Republican artists, that Christians that don't get that can get an unfair shake in this business and entertainment in general. And we both happen to work for two strongly opinionated and non-wavering on their values and beliefs and morals on these things. And it's just interesting. It came from a field, Frozen Feet in Louisiana, and here we are working for two artists that we are. We have a mutual super fan, Miss Rachel, Ditzy Cowgirl. And she is always on me. When you do the podcast with Tate, you guys have to set up a JM Big and Rich tour or some shows at least. She said, I'd love to go see she said, y'all are all on the same page on everything. Why don't I get to buy one ticket and see both of you guys? So I told her we would work on that. So I'll mention it. I know Justin would be all about it. So if you get a chance, tell the boys any tour things pop up, and I'll make sure to tell ours. We'd love to do at least a couple of shows together at some point, because I don't think, maybe outside of a festival here and there, I don't think I've done any shows with Big and Rich ever, which is crazy. Well, even with John Party, since we were on tour with Justin until now, we've done one festival together in the last 13 years. Yeah.
It's crazy how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, I'm getting on a plane with them here in just a few hours. We got to go do a show in Charlotte. A lot of private shows is what we do, which probably is why we're not on some of the stuff. But man, wouldn't that be a killer show?
Oh, it'd
Justin
be great.
And those
well,
guys.
Maybe we'll get to do some a private thing, a corporate thing, or a fundraiser type thing, because we do some of that, not as much, but we're getting into doing some more of that. As you know,
I mean, that's
my gig this weekend. I've got a one-off private event at a big business in Mississippi, Mississippi, some huge facility. They do a big yearly party for their employees and have big act every year and a big crawfish bowl. So that's where we're going. We got a one-off Saturday. Same thing. I'm going to drive. I don't get to fly in a private jet like you, but I'll drive my truck. I'll drive my F-150 to Mississippi. And back. Well, I know you got to get gone. You got all kinds of stuff to do, but I want to get a few things that we do with every guest on here before we get you out of here. And we're going to
stand by. Kenny's texting me right now.
Okay, go ahead.
See what he says. Any chance?
Exclusive. Big Kenny texting.
He's asking, are we going to have any food on the jet?
It's a jet, buddy. You can have whatever you want. Me and Justin, when we used to fly private, we just throw out some random requests sometimes. And, buddy, they can make it happen. It's going to run you. It's better to stop and get some in and out on the way, but.
Well, I'll pick up.
What's John and Kenny's food of choice? What's their normal preferences? Are they on the Chinese buffet train like Brother Jeff? Or are they more chicken and dumplings like me?
Man, they're not real picky at all. This will probably be some grilled chicken salads from Jonathan's or somewhere, that I can pick up and go and. They typically eat a little something on the plane because, like most artists, they don't want to eat a lot before they go on stage
or right too close before the time to go on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna have my assistant Nathan Howard. I'm gonna have him on at some point. He's got some. He also works for Hank Jr., so he's got some.
That's what I want to hear. I want to hear that.
Yeah, he's got some good.
I will
ones.
not be taking the out in that.
Yeah, he's got some good because Hank has some kind of not specific, but there's certain things he likes, and Nathan will have to go find what is the one some kind of is it veal piccata or some Italian dish, and he'll be in nowhere Oklahoma trying to find this Italian.
What do you mean
dish
they don't have it?
Yeah, so we'll get him on there.
Before we wrap here, let me. I got to see who's at the door real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. No, we're no rush.
I'll be right back. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
I
hit the head while I was up. So.
I don't blame you. I'll get this going over here. What's your birthday?
My birthday is November 1st, 1978.
11/1/78. I am a 9/11/79.
Really? 9/11.
Yes, 9/11. How about that? Also, birth date of Alabama legend Paul Bear Bryant.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's his birthday before it was mine, and my cousin John in Louisiana.
My mom is 9/12. Shares a birthday with George Jones.
Oh, so we're November 1st, 1978. I'll do this first. We do several things on the way out here with each one of our guests. One of them I wanted to do is big number in your phone. Who, and you've got some good ones, buddy, of all the numbers you have in your phone, if you had one that either people would think is like, wow, I can't believe they got the number, or to you personally, you're like, of all the numbers I have, this one is just kind of surprising that I have this number. What's the
I got
biggest
this guy. I got this guy's name and number that goes by the handler in here.
Well, you got to dream bigger, buddy.
Well, as I'm sure you know, I mean, artists change their number all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
I mean,
but is there an athlete?
I doubt Blake's number is the same as it was, but Dirks is in there. The guys from Platts are in there. Obviously John and Kenny are, they're in there. Stone Cold Steve Austin in the non-country world.
That's what I'm talking about there. Yeah. Now we're talking.
Yeah. He and I text quite often.
I was out, we actually got to go to his house last year. We went to his ranch. He is neighbors with Cody, who produces this podcast, is one of Justin's manager. Steve bought the land next to his grandparents out in Nevada. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yep. Right.
Wow.
And his family's had that land since the 70s, and there was nothing there. And his dad and granddad and them were helping take care of some of Steve's stuff and using different things. He came over on the 4-wheeler. We caught up for a minute. We had a show out there. We were playing in Reno. So tell him we said hello. I don't know if he remembers or not, but we had that mutual connection because I'm obviously friends with Diamond Dallas Page, and they were roommates and all that stuff.
Right.
So it was great to catch up with Steve. I told everybody, I said, his hands are still massive. They are just some big, meaty hands, and he has got water hoses for veins in his arms.
He's just strong.
Just a bull. He's just like a gorilla. I mean, Justin said when he pulled up on this 4-wheeler, he had the biggest 4-wheeler you can get. It looks like he could have just pulled up on it and just put it over his back when he got there. Yeah. That's how he was just manhandling it. Yeah. But that's a good one. And I thought you would have said the president. I figured you would have had a president's number or two.
I don't have his, but it's funny. I mean, I do have some people in there. I mean, John, it's just so random. Like, he'll put me on an email with something. I mean, there's people like Newt Gingrich, Christy Noem.
Yeah.
I'm sure Sarah Huckabee, I'm sure you guys are tight with her.
Oh, yeah.
Like her,
she's
Bongino.
Great. And you're friends with Tommy, the anchor that does all the political stuff. Tommy, what's her name?
Tommy Lahren. Yeah, she's in there. Yeah,
I'm sure she's in there. I know you're buddies with her. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's some good ones. We're gonna go with Stone Cold because I bet most people would lose.
He's probably got the most followers.
Yeah,
if you went by social media numbers.
Right.
He's up there.
Well, and
you should get him on here.
I need to. He doesn't do a lot of this stuff, but and he was one of the inspirations for me actually doing a podcast. If you want to go back and listen to some good information, if you like pro wrestling, especially music sprinkled in there because he's a big country fan.
He is, yeah.
And most of those wrestlers were, if you've watched any of the Young Rock or any of that stuff. But the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast, Unleashed with Stone Cold, was a great podcast, and it's one of the first ones I listened to it before I listened to Joe Rogan. That and Jim Ross, the Ross Report with Jim Ross. Those are two podcasts I listened to before anything, and they're both great.
It's interesting, getting to know him and just talking business stuff. It's very similar to us as far as logistics stuff. I mean, they travel, in between. They get to the venue. They got dressing rooms. They got catering. They got everything's based off time, which our world runs off time. What time do we leave? What time do we get there? When do we load in? When do we eat? When do we play? When do we leave? All the same stuff. It's interesting, but.
And kind of working your way up, paying the dues too. When you start out there, you're in your car and you're driving yourself, and you don't have any help, and you're not getting paid crap, and then whatever
And then now
stage.
some of them lease buses from the same bus companies that we use, you know.
Yep, and fly. I mean, when I pull up to get on the crew bus the other week, because I fly to Nashville some and I'll just jump on the crew bus. There's all the WWE buses in the parking lot out there, and I'm like, yeah, they're based out of here too. Well, the next thing I have on here is birthday number one. So in November 1st, 1978, your parents are pulling out of the parking lot of the hospital there.
Joplin, Missouri.
In Joplin, Missouri. It's a fine November day. Wasn't storming, wasn't too cold. Beautiful day. The sun broke through the clouds just a little as they're pulling out. And they turn on the radio, and Lon Helton's on there saying the number one song in country music today is...
I might have an idea. Can I get a hint?
Wow. Male artist.
Okay.
Actually just did a big farewell last show in town thing for him last year with a bunch of acts. Can't remember if you were there or not.
Was not.
He, dominated the charts in the 80s.
Facial hair or no facial hair?
No facial hair.
Oh. Man, I was going to guess,
and a unique artist in a way of had a disability he turned into an ability and never shied from it and used it.
Well, then that would tell me Mel Tillis, but I was thinking it was going to be Kenny Rogers, the gambler.
Ooh, that'd be a good one. This similar era, more of a straight country guy. A disability would be a disability, but never slowed him down. Several other artists, similar disability over the years, become
Ronnie Millsap.
There you go.
What song?
Let's Take the Long Way Around the World.
Oh man, yeah.
That makes so much sense for you too. You're born, and that's it. Let's take the long way around the world. Your parents probably drove around just to let you sleep and look at you while they were driving you home that day.
I almost guessed Elvira.
You know what? That's in that era too. Do you know what mine was the next year? About roughly a little less than a year later.
Give me a hint.
Birth name Harold Lloyd Jenkins.
Oh, that's Conway Twitty.
The song, I May Never Get to Heaven.
Oh,
but I once
came
mighty close. Ain't that something? How they work those out? Isn't that something? How that always works out.
How about Conway Twitty? I'm a dreamer, and you're the dream.
Oh, so many good ones. I mean, with that velour jumpsuit, with that chest hair hanging out, and his emblem, and that hair, perfect. Every woman in the crowd losing their mind. All right,
take his pick.
Absolutely, Ronnie. Long way. All right, next number we've got, or next item we have, Mount Rushmore of music. Doesn't have to be country, just your personal Mount Rushmore of music.
Oh, yeah, man. I think about this a lot. I get asked this a lot, too. It's almost impossible to answer, right? But how many are we putting on the mountain?
4.
Just 4.
4. Can be a group, can be a duo, counts as one.
Well, I think you have to have Elvis and Michael Jackson on there. As far as music, I mean, when you think about what they did to the music business, or just what they did, I mean, I just think those two are undeniable as far as that. And then that's where it gets tough for me, because obviously I think you got to have Garth and George on there, at some point, somewhere maybe, but there's so many you could list, Haggard, I mean, all
of the highwaymen, anybody, Hank Sr., Hank Jr.
Yeah, my thing with Hank Sr. is I respect it a lot, but he died so young, right?
Yeah, right.
And so when you start thinking about that,
like Keith Whitley,
same with Keith, a huge Keith fan,
and he would have been George Strait had or
Yeah.
in that realm. You'd have to think. And not to cut you off, but I always use that too when people talk about country. If it's just a country Mount Rushmore, I always say Dolly. How could you not have Dolly on there?
That's exactly where I was going. I was going with her, and I'm going with, you think about Haggard, and you think about even Alan Jackson, and I say people like that because, man, they wrote it. Like Alan wrote all that stuff in the 90s. Dolly wrote all that.
Yep.
Haggard,
AJ wrote "Remember When" by himself right after it happened.
Right. And Dolly wrote all that. And Haggard, you think of all that stuff. I mean, he was a poet. Obviously you got Johnny Cash, like big argument there for him, But it's just,
and then a lot of people is the Waylon thing. People will say, "Well, if you got Merle and Waylon, I mean, how do you pick between Merle and Waylon?" Then it's just a personal.
I mean,
preference.
like you could have a Mount Rushmore of just the Highwaymen and say, bam, they get their own mountain.
Absolutely.
But for me, as far I think you got to have Elvis and Michael Jackson on it as far as when you're talking music. And then, to your point about Dolly, I think Dolly's got to be on there because you think about what she has done and she's continuing to do, and what she does outside of music, her charitable work. I mean, my son gets a book. He thinks he gets a book every month from Dolly.
Yeah.
She's got that book program.
Right.
And then he's like, "Oh, Miss Dolly sent me a book,"
That's awesome.
Things like
and the
that.
movies. I mean, the movies.
Yeah. I mean, Last Little Whorehouse in Texas, son.
LaGrange, Texas. Yeah, absolutely. ZZ Top wrote a song.
I could watch it every day of my life.
On the boat yesterday. It's so crazy. That's a real true story about a whorehouse in Texas. And ZZ Top wrote LaGrange about it. And then they have a movie with Burt Reynolds and Dolly Parton in it.
Hard Candy Christmas.
That's it. And then 9 to 5 and all that stuff. And I said that before, like a lot of these artists, and even Elvis and Michael Jackson, different mediums, but the biggest acts normally had crossover success to some level. Even the Highwaymen, Johnny Cash, all those guys, they were in a ton of Westerns and not big successful movies, but they were in a ton of different types of movies back in the day. And they would host the New Year's Eve celebrations, and they did the work outside of that. So I've asked people, is Dolly without 9 to 5? Is George Strait without Pure Country? Is Elvis without all those crappy movies?
My answer is yes.
And then you look, you think they still rise to the same level of success? See, I don't think, man. I think that there's the casual fans, and you get the everyday people who don't listen to country that are outside of rural America. It takes something like a crossover, like a movie, like a Blake and Luke and them getting on these reality shows and being hosts. It just takes it to another level to where the people that don't leave their house after dark but do watch morning television and nighttime TV are now immersed in it. The same with the straight thing. Even if you weren't a country music fan in that era, you went and watched Pure Country and then you got it, same with 9 to 5, all those, but maybe not. We'll never know.
I think there's an argument for Millsap to be on the Mount Rushmore. I mean, you listen to his 40 greatest hits.
Yeah. Well, and Conway Twitty had the record before Straight.
Yeah. I mean, it's so good, but
it's too hard to do. And going back to that too, is the rise of Lainey Wilson. Has she not on Yellowstone? Does that not help?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question.
You like to think so, but that stuff that puts you on a mainstream audience of people in another state that don't go to country concerts.
Sure.
That are now going to download your stuff or go look you up and follow you on something. So I think it's all part of it. And Willie, you think about Willie. He only had a couple of number ones at best, but he's always relevant because of the aura. Yeah. Same with Charlie Daniels, 1 or 2 big hits on everything. And Charlie has an argument to be on that too, just because of notoriety. I mean, he's been in everything, King of the Hill, this, that. I mean, the guy with the fiddle, Charlie Daniels, never went down to Georgia. Everybody knows what that's about,
Yeah. So. Yeah. Reba.
Reba. I felt like that's Dolly. Then it was Reba kind of going in. And I feel like Laney's kind of doing that same role. You're good on TV. Yeah. They know how to work it. They like doing that stuff. So yeah, great list there. Before we let you go, I'm gonna play one thing. We have the 424 handler line, like Tater said earlier, and I've got a couple of voicemails I want to play. This is one I've got a week or so ago from a friend, and this is a question he asked, and I thought we could answer it together.
Okay.
Hey, what's up, JR? This is Brett Bierbauer. I know you mentioned you were a wrestling fan on your podcast, and was wondering what you thought of John Cena turning heel and surpassing Ric Flair, becoming the all-time leading WWE champion. I think it's great. Just want to know your thoughts. Feels like wrestling is coming back to the Attitude Era. Thanks, JR.
That was Brett Bierbauer asking about what did we think about John Cena coming in and winning and taking the title and beating Ric Flair's record of all-time championships. I'm all about it. They bring a lot of the older wrestlers back, but I think it's good for the sport, and records are meant to be broken. I mean, it was a matter of time. Cena did a lot of right stuff. He carried the flag for a long time with the company, so I don't think it's a bad thing that they let him pass Ric Flair at this point when Flair's not actively wrestling, and you got to make new stars. So I think I'm all about it. I didn't actually see the match. I heard about it and watched a lot of the stuff, but I'm all about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you on that. Stone Cold, I tell him all the time that, for me, wrestling had gotten pretty hard to watch.
Yep.
It just got pretty, there was just no excitement behind it. It was kind of like golf with Tiger.
Yeah.
When he wasn't in there, it was not as exciting, and it's just the truth. And I think finally, WWE is figuring that out, that the business needed a jolt, needed something, bringing the Rock back like what they did for that run. And I think I heard it in that voicemail. The guy was talking about bringing some of the Attitude Era back.
Yes.
Is that what he said?
Yes.
Is that what he said in that? And I think that's smart. I think they're figuring that out, that's what the fans, I mean, it was so huge when that era was going. I think it just got a little too soft for too long, that they lost a lot of the stuff, and the shock factor with John turning heel is giving it a boost. Like when Hogan went to Hollywood Hogan, it was like, no, because Hogan was my guy. I was like, he's bad. This can't be.
Yeah, no way. You never thought it would happen, and then it does. Same with Cena. You never thought Cena would turn, but I agree. The athletes are just so phenomenal, but the storylines and all the talking, and it's just like, I can't keep up. I just want to see some action. Let me know who the good guy and bad guy is. That kind of stuff. But it goes in waves. Same with music.
Keep it simple.
Yep. Keep it simple. I've always heard it's like a 12-hour clock, music, and I guess you could do the wrestling too. It starts out from just dead center normal, and then it starts getting more extreme, and when it gets to its fullest extremeness, it has to reset and get more folky back to its roots, and then starts the cycle over. That kind of makes sense. I'm going to do one more, and I know you got to get out of here today, but I thought this was a great one, and you might even recognize this guy's voice. Let's see.
JR, it's Pony Boy. You tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me. You tell him.
I don't know who that guy was, but I'd love to get him on this podcast sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you got him, son.
Well, buddy, thank you so. Yeah, I know it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to doing it again soon. It'd be great to have you back on. We'll talk. Maybe we can get Jeff and Cletus, and we'll all do a big group thing sometime. That would be fun.
Might have to have a radio edit version of that.
Yeah,
But,
right. Well, that's a good thing. None of this is live. We can always
Yeah.
chop and block and whatever we need to do. The
So
magic
we should go
of
live
television.
with us all. Just do a live one sometime and see how it goes.
We should just leave mine muted and let y'all just go. Yeah, hey, I'm not implementing. I don't know. Something was wrong here.
Well, hey, I want to say thank you for having me, and I want to say that I'm proud of you, and I think this is awesome what you're doing. I think it's really cool to hear people's stories. I mean, we know a handful of buddies' stories just from knowing them, but some of these people that I don't know that you're having on, it's interesting to hear. Like John, Boston Johnny. I listened, I listened to that one the other day, and it was cool to hear that story and how he came through and the FGL stuff and the Chase Rice stuff. I mean, it was just like, man, I get it.
Yeah.
You just find a way.
Find a way, and we've all got them, and there's thousands of us.
There is, yeah. So
it's very interesting.
We'll keep it rocking, man.
I will, brother. Well, thank you for your time. Tell everybody we said hello. Y'all go find my brother
same.
Chris Tate on socials. Y'all friend him up, all that good stuff. Send us any questions you have. You can send them to me at JR the Handler, jrthehandler.com. Or 424-HANDLER. You can leave us a voicemail or a text on there if you got any questions or comments about this episode, and we'll have Chris on again to answer any of those, or we can just comment them on the future. But again, thank you to my old buddy Chris Tate. Hope to see you at a show soon. If y'all go to a Big and Rich show anytime soon, y'all look for old Tate up there and give him a wave and tell him you heard him on the JR the Handler show, and we'll see you next time, brother. Thank you. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. That was my old buddy Chris Tate, the Tater himself. I thought that was a great backstory, fascinating. I didn't know some of that myself, and I've known him for all these years, which is which should happen regularly, because a lot of these things, we may or may not have talked about sometime, and some of these things we just never came up. Like a couple of those acts he worked with, I had never known that. But we're going to get out of here for today. Thank y'all for tuning in as always. Spread the love. Like I said, the biggest thing you can do for this show is to just share this episode with someone you think that may like it, or share the whole show with someone who you think may like it. Like, rate, comment. That really helps. If you don't mind rating the show on Apple in those different formats, please do. Leave a little review and just say, hey, enjoyed it. Just something quick and simple. That all helps. Please do that. All the socials. Go check us out on YouTube. You can watch the show and all that fun stuff there. Like, subscribe there as well. You can go to jrthehandler.com for links to everything. Come see me at a show soon. Before we get out of here today, I'm going to read a selection, of my Charlie Daniels Let's All Make the Day Count book, The Everyday Wisdom of Charlie Daniels. Number 72, Admit Defeat. Whoever tries to hide his sins will not succeed, but the one who confesses his sins and leaves them behind will find mercy. Proverbs 28:13. One of the hardest things for some of us to do is admit to ourselves that we have faults. We will go to all kinds of lengths to blame our shortcomings on another person, an outside influence, our health, or any number of erroneous trivialities just to continue our charade. Before I finally admitted to myself in 1968 that I either had to stop smoking or face serious health problems, I blamed my perpetual colds, lung infections, and shortness of breath on germs and contagions. I was eventually forced to face the fact that these side effects were caused by the 4 packs of cigarettes I was inhaling each day. Similarly, early in my music career, I would blame my lackluster playing on the poor quality of the instrument or the deplorable shape it was in. And my lack of energy in school was never the consequences of a simple fact that I stayed up late the night before and didn't get enough sleep. Blaming your faults on other people and other things can become a habit that turns you into an irresponsible liar that nobody trusts. It's best to deal with it. Admitting your faults is the only way to correct and overcome them, and it's a sign of a maturity and character. Let's all make the day count.